the kind of dialect I wanted to talk with you about, and this is a kind of dialect where if you can understand this, English majors, this gives you pretty powerful tools for actually doing something with dialect writing in your classes, coming up with really neat things to say in class. And this is a kind of dialect that's called I dialect.
I dialect.
I dialect.
I dialect.
Right. Problem with I dialect?
I don't know. Dialect is something you hear.
Dialect is something you hear.
So it'd be ear dialect. Would be
dialect
correct.
would normally be something you hear, but in our business, in our line, as they say, it's also something you see, right? Because it's on the page.
Oh, I suppose that's true.
Right?
Yes,
right.
yes,
Okay.
I get what you're saying.
Okay.
You see the dialect.
Okay.
Well, that's true. When we're yes, okay.
Yeah, so let's get at this, all right, by looking at one more particular example, all right? And I've brought in one last example here, and this is from a poem that was written in 1848 by James Russell Lowell. He's a New England poet who wrote a poem called The Bigelow Papers. All right, now, the Bigelow Papers, I should say, just to give you a little bit of context, takes on all kinds of issues of national importance. Right? It's written at a time when Texas was being annexed and at a time of heightened tensions between North and South over slavery and all kinds of other things. And Lowell writes his poem as a series of dialogues between speakers who hail from very different regions of the country.
Okay.
Now, in the moment that I brought in here, one of those speakers is John C. Calhoun. Right, who was a senator from South Carolina, and actually he had been vice president also. And John C. Calhoun speaks for most of this stanza that I'm about to give you. Now, what I think you should do, Charles, is I think that you should read this stanza.
Oh,
right?
no.
No, I think you should.
No.
And I really do. And I think that you should pay very close attention to all the signals that Lowell is giving you on how to read this stanza. Right? He's trying to sound like these characters really would.
Okay, now this is a Southerner.
He is a Southerner from South Carolina. Just pretend you are a
Lowell's a Northerner, so he's making fun of a Southerner, or what? Sort of half, maybe?
Sometimes
well,
he
let's
is.
look at the passage.
Yeah,
Just look what it's doing. Let's look what is doing. What Anarchy's brewing. Anarchy. I don't know what anarchy is. Anarchy.
Yeah, just for the record, I want to say I don't know what kind of dialect that's supposed to sound like.
Okay,
but
sorry.
I think that's anarchy.
Anarchy. Okay.
I think that's his way of saying anarchy.
Just look what is doing, what anarchy's brewing in the beautiful clime or the olive and vine. Now I sound wrong. And the wise aristocracies a tumbling to ruin, and the Sankey-lots drawing and drinking their wine. No, that's terrible. I'm sounding like a Brooklyn person.
I think just finish it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Says John C. Calhoun, says he. Yes, says Johnson. In France they're beginning to dance the Beelzebub's own rigadoon, says he. Okay,
now that's obviously a pretty thick dialect. You're forgiven for having some trouble with that.
Thank you. Terribly done.
But, you know, so what words gave you trouble? Yeah.
Well, other than anarchy, which we decided is anarchy, I did recognize that aristocracies is probably aristocracy, shortened there. Well, I don't know. Drawing. Sankey-lots drawing.
I think that's drawing, as in drawing some wine.
Drawing, I'm drinking their wine.
Yeah, but the R there kind of signals us a sort of southern way of saying drawing, right?
Okay, drawing.
Right. I mean, this is all a kind of realism, right? Dialect writing tries to realistically portray the way people sound. But and those words that you're pointing out, you know, do that, right? I mean, you know, when John C. Calhoun says anarchy, he doesn't really say anarchy. He says something like anarchy.
Anarchy.
Right? Yeah. When he says drawing, he says kind of drawing.
Drawing.
Right. And so
there's also those other words like what. I mean.
Well, okay. Now I want to focus on those because that's where we're seeing what is called the I dialect. All right. What do you notice about that word what?
What? Well, it's what. I mean, it is actually the way you say what, but it's spelt what.
That's exactly right.
W-U-T.
That's exactly right. And that's not the only instance of that kind of thing here in the stanza, right? I mean, look at what's going on with the word says a couple of times down there.
Yeah, it's S-E-Z, as we say back home.
Right. S-E-Z.
S-E-Z, says.
Sounds the same way as S-A-Y-S.
It's like sometimes when you read cuz, like because, it's spelled C-U-Z sometimes.
Okay.
But, you know.
Okay. So then,
but that's the way it sounds, though, right? Says.
It looks, in other words, in a way that ought to sound the same way it sounds when it's spelled the right way, the standard English way.
Right.
Right. And that's why we call it I dialect, because it's a difference that appears to the eye, not to the ear. You can see it on the page, but you can't hear it when you read it.
So the question is, why does he do that?
Well, okay. The question is, why does he do that? the question is also, where is the moment of difference here, of linguistic difference? Right? I mean, if Calhoun sounds the same way that I do, or you do, or Russell Lowell, or James Russell Lowell does when he says the word says or what, well, then why does Lowell spell it differently?
That's the question I was asking you, and you should answer that question.
Well,
I don't know.
Well, one thing we might hazard is that Lowell is really working overtime to control the way we experience Calhoun's speech, right? Even though there isn't an audible difference here, Lowell seems to want to signal us that Calhoun couldn't possibly mean the same thing that you and I mean when he says,
okay.
Right? I mean, that's a way of sort of implying that the man is unlettered, he's uneducated.
Oh, so the fact that he spells it S-E-Z is indicating that he can't actually spell it correctly if he were writing it down. So it's kind of a way of tainting him with illiteracy.
Yeah, that's exactly what I just said, Charles.
Oh, okay.
So I dialect.
I said tainting with illiteracy.
I dialect always or often, right, points up a moment where the author is really intervening in the speech of his characters, and often trying to draw some kind of social hierarchy. And it's important to sort of recognize those moments and to ask critical questions of them. I mean, after all, even a perfectly eloquent speaker can be made to appear somewhat unlettered when their words are filtered through the lens of I dialect.
Ah, and on the screen there, it showed how you sounded like an idiot when you said that.
That's right, Charles. That's right. That's exactly what I did. Okay, I think that's enough anyway for this episode of the Close Reading Cooperative.
See you again next time, then.
See you next time.